I never imagined that buying a home in Maple Ridge Estates would turn into a full-blown nightmare. That illusion shattered the moment I met Karen Wilkins, the self-appointed ruler of our homeowners association. From the day I moved in 6 months ago, Karen seemed to have me under constant surveillance. She kept a running list of my so-called violations. My hedges were allegedly 2 inches too tall, my mailbox wasn't precise shade of Maple Ridge mahogany, and even the welcome mat at my front door hadn't made it onto her approved decor list. I work from home as a software developer, which unfortunately gives me a front row seat to Karen's daily neighborhood patrols. Clipboard in hand, she'd march up and down the street hunting for infractions. Most of my neighbors learned to duck inside the moment they spotted her. I refused to live like that. This was my home, paid for with my own money, and while I respected reasonable rules, I wasn't about to let someone on a power trip control every detail of my life. Things truly went sideways when I decided to repaint my front door. The HOA guidelines stated that doors had to be painted in neutral, earth tone colors to maintain neighborhood harmony. I chose a deep forest green that perfectly complemented the brick exterior. To avoid any issues, I submitted a color sample to the Architectural Review Committee and received written approval before touching a paintbrush. Karen, who wasn't even on that committee, took it personally. Before the paint had fully dried, she appeared on my doorstep. "That is not an approved color," she snapped, her voice carrying that nasal tone that felt like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Actually, it is," I replied calmly, pulling up the approval email on my phone. "The committee signed off on it last week." She squinted at the screen, her lips tightening like she'd just bitten into a lemon. "Well, they shouldn't have. It's too bold. It disrupts the visual flow of the street." "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said, forcing myself to stay composed, but I followed the proper process and received official approval. "Is there anything else I can help you with today?" She stormed off, muttering something about revising the guidelines. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next day, I found a violation notice shoved under my door, claiming my newly painted door violated community standards and demanding I repaint it within 7 days or face a $50 per day fine. It was signed by Karen as HOA president, but was missing official letterhead and the required board signatures. I emailed the entire board, attaching both my approval and Karen's unofficial notice, and politely asked for clarification. Several board members replied, confirming the door color had been approved and apologizing for confusion. One even mentioned they'd be having a conversation with Karen about proper procedures. I felt vindicated, but I also knew this wasn't over. For a few weeks, things stayed quiet. Karen still shot me death glares during her patrols, but she kept her distance. Then came the rose bush incident. After carefully checking the guidelines, I planted a row of yellow roses along the side of my property. Roses were clearly listed as approved plants. The very next morning, I woke up to find every single bush cut down to the ground. My security camera told the rest of the story. In the early morning hours, Karen could be seen methodically destroying each rose bush with garden shears. I was furious, but I stayed strategic. Instead of confronting her directly, I invited 2 board members over and showed them the footage, making no accusations, just presenting the evidence. They were horrified. Karen was issued a formal warning and ordered to reimburse me for the plants. That's when things crossed a line. Shortly afterward, I left town for a week-long conference in San Diego. I arranged for a neighbor to collect my mail and water the replacement roses, which were now covered by additional security cameras. Everything seemed fine until the 5th day. My neighbor called me, panicked. "I just tried to water your plants, but my key doesn't work," he said. "The lock looks different. Did you change it before you left?" My stomach dropped. "No, I definitely didn't change the locks." "There's also a notice on your door," he added, "about unauthorized exterior modifications." He sent me a photo. It was another one of Karen's unofficial violation notices, this time claiming I'd altered my exterior light fixtures without approval and that the HOA had been forced to secure the property in my absence. There was no mention of changing the locks, which meant she was trying to cover her tracks. I immediately called the police and reported a break-in, explaining the situation as clearly as I could. Then I booked the next available flight home, cutting my conference short. By the time I returned, police had already visited my house, but couldn't enter without me present. Karen had apparently told them she was securing an abandoned property with unapproved modifications, and even produced some bogus HOA document claiming she had the authority to do so. When I finally returned home, this time accompanied by 2 police officers, I was stunned by what I found. Karen hadn't just changed my exterior locks. She had gone inside my house. Furniture had been shifted. Drawers were left partially open. And most disturbing of all, my exterior light fixtures were gone, replaced with cheap, low-quality ones she had apparently decided were acceptable. The originals, which had cost me several $100s, had vanished completely. After reviewing my security footage, which clearly showed Karen hiring a locksmith, changing the locks, and entering my home multiple times over several days, one of the officers shook his head. "This is breaking and entering," he said flatly, "and theft. Would you like to press charges?" "Absolutely," I replied without hesitation. The officers took my statement and collected the footage as evidence, explaining that Karen would be contacted for questioning and that the district attorney would determine the exact charges. News of her arrest spread to the neighborhood almost immediately. Neighbors I barely knew began coming forward with their own stories. Years of intimidation, threats, and abuse of authority. It became clear that Karen's behavior wasn't an isolated incident. She'd been operating this way for a long time. The HOA board called an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove Karen as president and from the board entirely, citing gross misconduct and serious legal exposure for the association. But Karen wasn't done fighting. She hired an attorney who specialized in HOA law and claimed that, as president, she had broad enforcement powers, including the authority to change locks and enter homes if she deemed it necessary. Her lawyer even threatened to sue both me and the HOA for defamation and wrongful removal. That's when I hired my own attorney, one with extensive experience in property law and a history of shutting down overreaching HOAs. After reviewing the evidence, he was confident Karen had no legal ground to stand on. He advised me to proceed not only with a criminal case, but also with a civil lawsuit for breaking and entering, theft, property damage, and emotional distress. The criminal case came first. Karen was formally charged with breaking and entering, criminal trespass, and petty theft. Despite her attorney's attempt to get the charges dismissed, the judge was unequivocal. HOA presidents do not have the authority to enter private homes without owner consent or a court order, no matter the alleged violation. As the judge denied the motion and set a trial date, Karen's face drained of color. Her carefully styled blonde hair and designer outfit suddenly couldn't hide the fear in her eyes. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked small. The civil case went just as decisively. My attorney presented overwhelming evidence of Karen's harassment campaign, including testimony from multiple residents and copies of her countless unofficial violation notices. The court ruled entirely in my favor, awarding damages for the stolen fixtures, lock replacement, destroyed rose bushes, missed conference expenses, legal fees, and additional punitive damages meant to prevent future abuse. The final judgment totaled just over $22,000. When the amount was announced, Karen's face twisted in shock. She gasped, starting to protest, but her attorney quickly restrained her arm. "Your Honor, my client cannot possibly pay such an excessive amount," her attorney argued. The judge didn't flinch. "Perhaps your client should have considered the financial consequences before illegally entering someone's home and removing their property," he replied. "The judgment stands." The fallout didn't stop there. Karen's professional life unraveled quickly. As a real estate agent whose business depended heavily on HOA connections, news of her legal troubles spread fast. Her brokerage placed her on indefinite leave, citing liability and reputational concerns. The final blow came at the next general HOA meeting, one with record attendance. The board announced sweeping changes to the bylaws, limiting the power of any single board member and establishing strict procedures and oversight for enforcement actions. They called it the Wilkins Amendment, leaving no doubt about who had inspired it. Just as the meeting was wrapping up, Karen stormed in, clearly having heard about the vote. She scanned the room, seemingly expecting support from the neighbors she'd once bullied into silence. She found none. The new board president calmly informed her that, as a non-board member, she was welcome to observe, but not disrupt the meeting. "This is my neighborhood," Karen shrieked, her voice cracking. "I gave 8 years of my life to maintaining its standards. You can't just erase everything I built." "Actually," the president replied evenly, "we can, and we have." The vote was unanimous. Karen's face flushed red, then went completely pale. She opened her mouth to speak again, but no words came out. With one last look of disbelief, she turned and walked out, the door closing behind her with a final, decisive click.